Chapter 1. The ceiling has no answers. Cindy Moore lay sprawled across her bed, the glow of the television fading as the credits of yet another holiday movie rolled by. Perfect families, twinkling lights, laughter echoing through cozy living rooms. It was all so scripted. She clicked the remote, silencing the cheerful carols that suddenly felt like mockery. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the heater. Outside, the city was dressed in its December best, garlands strung across lampposts, shop windows glittering with fake snow. But inside, Cindy's world was muted. A stack of unread books sat on her nightstand, their spines promising adventure and romance. But tonight, even they couldn't tempt her. She stared at the ceiling, as if the plaster might offer wisdom. Was love real? The question slipped through her mind like a whisper, one she'd been dodging for years. Tonight, it landed with weight. Cindy wasn't unhappy, not exactly. She had a good job, a tidy apartment, and a reputation for being the dependable one at work. But happiness was a tricky thing. It wasn't the same as fulfillment, and lately, the gap between the two felt like a canyon. She rolled onto her side, pulling the blanket tighter. 33, single, professional. Her life was a neat resume, but where was the messy, beautiful part? The late-night talks, the laughter over burnt pancakes, the someone who cared enough to notice when she had a bad day? College had been fun, but not in the way people expected. No wild parties, no reckless adventures. Cindy had loved the library. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights, the smell of old paper, the thrill of chasing knowledge. While others were chasing each other, she was chasing ideas. And she didn't regret it. Not really. Her work ethic had carried her far, but it had also built walls. She wasn't interested in short-term flings or empty promises. If she was going to love someone, it had to mean something. That was her philosophy. And maybe that was why she was here, alone, binge-watching strangers' happy endings. She sighed, reaching for her phone. A beach vacation sounded tempting. White sand, blue water, no Christmas carols. But the thought of airports and crowds made her groan. No, she'd stay home, catch up on reading, sleep in. Comfort wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. Still, the loneliness lingered like an unwelcome guest. Cindy closed her eyes, her mind drifting toward that haunting question. Was love real? Or just another story people told themselves to feel less alone? The heater clicked off, leaving the room in silence. Cindy exhaled slowly, surrendering to sleep. Tomorrow would be another day of work, another day of polite smiles and deadlines. Christmas was coming whether she liked it or not. Morning arrived with a pale winter sun filtering through her blinds. Cindy dressed in her usual understated style, navy slacks, cream sweater, hair pulled back in a neat twist. She wasn't flashy, but she didn't need to be. Her beauty was quiet, the kind that didn't shout for attention. At the office, the air buzzed with holiday energy. Tinsel-framed doorways, someone had set up a miniature tree near the break room, and the scent of cinnamon coffee drifted through the halls. Cindy offered a polite smile as she passed clusters of coworkers debating ugly sweater patterns. Her boss, Marlene, a whirlwind of cheer in a red blazer, spotted her instantly. Cindy, just the person I need. Cindy paused, bracing herself. Morning, Marlene. We're doing Secret Santa this year, Marlene announced, eyes sparkling. And an ugly sweater contest. It's going to be fun. Cindy managed a diplomatic nod. Sounds festive. Festive and mandatory, Marlene added with a grin. I need your help organizing it. You're so good with details. Of course. Cindy swallowed a sigh. Sure. What do you need? Just a simple list. Everyone gets a name, $20 limit, thoughtful gift. And the sweater contest. Winner gets a parking spot labeled King or Queen of Christmas fashion for the year. Cindy almost laughed. Almost. I'll handle it. Perfect. You're a lifesaver. Marlene squeezed her arm and bustled away, leaving Cindy with a mental to-do list and a faint sense of dread. Secret Santa. Ugly sweaters. Holiday cheer. Cindy could already picture herself at the party, sitting in a corner, nursing a cup of coffee, pretending to read while everyone else swapped jokes and selfies. It wasn't that she disliked people. She just didn't know how to do small talk. Her mind was always somewhere else, chasing ideas instead of conversations. Still, she'd do her part. She always did. As she settled at her desk, Cindy glanced out the window. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the glass, soft and silent. For a moment, she let herself imagine something different. A Christmas that didn't feel like an obligation. A Christmas where she wasn't alone. The thought was fleeting, but it left a trace of warmth. Maybe, just maybe, this season had a surprise waiting for her. Chapter 2. Office cheer and ugly sweaters. The office looked like a Christmas elf had exploded in the lobby. Garlands draped across the reception desk. A plastic reindeer stood guard near the elevators, and someone had gone rogue with glitter. Cindy stepped inside, clutching her laptop bag, and immediately regretted wearing a neutral gray coat. She looked like a grayscale photo in a Technicolor world. Morning, Cindy, chirped Marlene, her boss, appearing from behind a tower of gift-wrapped boxes. The woman was a walking holiday card, red blazer, green scarf, and earrings shaped like tiny candy canes. Cindy wondered if Marlene had a secret Pinterest board titled Christmas or Bust. Morning, Cindy replied, adjusting her bag. She was prepared for spreadsheets, not sleigh bells. Guess what? Marlene's eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement that usually preceded extra work. Secret Santa assignments are ready, and the ugly sweater contest is officially live. Cindy managed a polite smile. Sounds festive. Festive and mandatory, Marlene said, echoing yesterday's declaration. You're the organizer, remember? You're the glue holding this merry madness together. Cindy resisted the urge to groan. Glue was sticky, and sticky things were hard to escape. Right? I'll send out the assignments today. Perfect. And don't forget to sign up for the sweater contest. Winner gets a prime parking spot for the whole year. Marlene wiggled her eyebrows like this was the deal of the century. Cindy pictured herself in a neon green monstrosity with pom-poms and jingling bells. The mental image was so absurd she almost laughed. Almost. I'll think about it. That's the spirit. Marlene beamed and swept off toward the break room, leaving a faint trail of cinnamon-scented enthusiasm in her wake. At her desk, Cindy opened the spreadsheet she'd created for the Secret Santa draw. Names, departments, email addresses, all neatly organized. She clicked the randomizer and watched as pairs formed like awkward dance partners at a middle school prom. Her own assignment popped up, Greg from accounting. Cindy barely knew him beyond the occasional hallway nod. What did one buy for a man whose hobbies probably included balancing ledgers and memorizing tax codes? She scribbled a note. Find gift under $20 that says, thoughtful. Without screaming, I Googled you. The office buzzed with chatter as word of the assignment spread. Cindy overheard snippets. $20? I can't even buy decent socks for that. Ugly sweater? Mine's going to have lights. Do you think Marlene will disqualify me if I wear a Grinch onesie? Cindy smiled faintly. She wasn't a Grinch exactly. More like Switzerland. Neutral. Observing the holiday chaos from a safe distance. By lunchtime, the break room resembled a strategy summit. Employees huddled over coffee, plotting sweater designs like generals planning an invasion. Cindy slipped in for a quick refill, hoping to escape unnoticed. No such luck. Cindy. It was Tara from marketing, sporting a headband with bobbing snowflakes. Are you entering the contest? Cindy hesitated. I haven't decided. You have to. It's tradition. Tara grinned. Last year, someone wore a sweater with a working train set. It circled their torso. Epic. Cindy blinked. That sounds heavy. Totally worth it. Come on, you'd look adorable in something with reindeer. Adorable. The word made Cindy want to hide under the coffee machine. I'll think about it, she said, which was code for probably not. Back at her desk, Cindy opened a browser tab and typed, thoughtful gifts under $20 for accountants. The results were a mix of calculators, novelty mugs, and stress balls shaped like dollar signs. She sighed. This was going to be harder than she thought. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Company Christmas party, 2 weeks. Cindy stared at it, feeling the familiar knot of dread. Parties were loud, chaotic, and full of small talk, the trifecta of discomfort. She pictured herself in a corner, nursing coffee, pretending to read while everyone else swapped jokes and selfies. Still, she'd go. She always did, because that's what dependable people do. As the day wound down, Cindy gathered her things and stepped outside. The city was draped in twilight, streets glowing with holiday lights. Couples strolled past, laughing, their breath mingling in the cold air. Cindy pulled her coat tighter and headed home, her mind juggling two thoughts. 1. Find a gift for Greg. 2. Survive the party without becoming a human ornament. She didn't know it yet, but the party would be anything but ordinary. Chapter 3. The gift hunt. Saturday morning greeted Cindy with a pale winter sun and the faint hum of carols drifting from a neighbor's apartment. She pulled on a chunky sweater, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and stared at her mission list. 1. Buy a Secret Santa gift for Greg from accounting. 2. Keep it under $20. 3. Make it thoughtful. 3 simple steps. Except Cindy knew thoughtful was a trap. Thoughtful meant personal, and personal meant knowing something about Greg beyond the fact that he wore glasses and had a fondness for khaki pants. She opened her laptop and typed, Greg accounting hobbies. The search engine blinked back at her like it was judging her life choices. She tried again. Gifts for accountants under $20. Results, world's best accountant mug, calculator keychain, a stress ball shaped like a dollar sign. Cindy groaned. Nothing said I barely know you like a mug announcing your profession. She wanted something clever, something that didn't scream I Googled your soul. By noon, Cindy was trudging through a crowded mall, dodging shoppers wielding oversized bags like weapons. Holiday music blared from every corner, and a man in a Santa suit waved at passing toddlers. Cindy muttered under her breath, this is why online shopping exists. She ducked into a bookstore, her safe haven. The scent of paper and ink calmed her instantly. Rows of novels stood like old friends, and for a moment she forgot about Greg. She ran her fingers along the spines, tempted to buy something for herself. Then an idea sparked. A book. Everyone needed a good book. But what kind? Did Greg read thrillers? Self-help? Cookbooks? Cindy pictured him hunched over spreadsheets, sipping coffee. Maybe something light, funny, a break from numbers. She picked up The Accountant's Guide to Escaping Spreadsheets, a quirky humor book with cartoons. Perfect. She flipped the price tag. $18.99. Victory. Feeling triumphant, Cindy wandered toward the checkout when a display caught her eye. Novelty socks with tiny calculators printed on them. She laughed out loud. Socks and a book, practical and playful. She grabbed a pair. As she paid, the cashier smiled. Secret Santa? Cindy nodded. How could you tell? Everyone's buying weirdly specific gifts this week. The cashier winked. Good luck. Back home. Cindy arranged the book and socks in a small gift bag, adding tissue paper like a pro. She stepped back and admired her work. Thoughtful? Check. Under $20? Barely. She collapsed onto the couch, scrolling through her phone. Photos of friends popped up, couples ice skating, families decorating trees. Cindy felt that familiar pang, sharp and quiet. She shoved it aside. 2 weeks until the party. 2 weeks until she'd sit in a corner with her coffee, pretending to read while everyone else swapped jokes. Unless, she shook her head. No, life wasn't a holiday movie. Surprises didn't just walk up and say hello. Still, as snow began to fall outside her window, Cindy couldn't help wondering if this Christmas might hold something different. Chapter 4. The party begins. The office had transformed into a winter wonderland, or at least a corporate interpretation of one. Paper snowflakes dangled from the ceiling, a playlist of upbeat carols hummed through the speakers, and the break room had been reborn as a buffet of holiday indulgence. Cookies, cheese platters, and a suspicious-looking punch bowl that Cindy was certain violated several health codes. She stood at the entrance, clutching her gift bag like a shield. Her sweater was simple, cream with a subtle knit pattern, because despite Marlene's relentless cheerleading, Cindy had not entered the ugly sweater contest. She'd considered it briefly, but the idea of wearing something that jingled every time she moved was a hard no. The room buzzed with laughter and chatter. People posed for selfies in front of a cardboard fireplace, mugs of cocoa in hand. Cindy scanned for an empty spot and found one. A small table tucked near the window, mercifully away from the crowd. Perfect. She slipped into the chair, set her bag on the floor, and pulled out her book. It was her armor, her escape hatch. If anyone asked, she was just finishing a chapter. In reality, she was counting down the minutes until she could leave without looking like a total Scrooge. Cindy, you made it. Marlene appeared like a festive apparition, her sweater blinking with tiny LED lights. Don't you look cozy? Cindy smiled politely. Thanks, everything looks great. Grab some food and mingle. Marlene gestured toward the buffet like a game show host revealing a prize. Oh, and the sweater contest judging starts in 20 minutes. You're missing out. I'll cheer from the sidelines, Cindy said, which earned her a wink before Marlene vanished into the crowd. The Secret Santa exchange began with much fanfare. Names were called, gifts were opened, laughter erupted over gag presents. A stapler wrapped in tinsel, a mug that said world's okayest employee. Cindy handed Greg his bag and received a polite smile in return. Mission accomplished. She settled back into her chair, flipping open her book. The words blurred as she listened to the hum of conversation around her. People were laughing, clinking glasses, snapping photos. Cindy felt like an observer in a play she hadn't auditioned for. And honestly, she was fine with that, until someone's shadow fell across her page. Mind if I sit here? The voice was warm, low, and unfamiliar. Cindy looked up and froze. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His jacket was tailored, his smile easy, and in his hand, a book. A hardcover, worn at the edges, like it had been read more than once. For a split second, Cindy's brain short-circuited. Attractive men didn't usually approach her at parties. Attractive men holding novels? That was practically a unicorn sighting. She blinked. Sure. He smiled, sliding into the chair across from her. Thanks. It's a little loud over there. He nodded toward the crowd, where someone was attempting to balance a plate of cookies on their head. Cindy managed to laugh. It's festive. His eyes flicked to her book, then back to hers. You're reading at a party. That's bold. She lifted a shoulder. Better than pretending to enjoy small talk. He grinned, holding up his own book like a peace offering. Fair enough. Cindy stared at the title, The Night Circus, one of her favorites. You're reading Morgenstern? Trying to, he said, leaning back in his chair. Though I keep getting interrupted by people asking why I'm not drinking eggnog. Cindy laughed, really laughed, and it startled her. It had been a while. I get that. For a moment, the noise of the party faded. It was just the two of them, two strangers with books, sharing a quiet rebellion against forced merriment. So, he said, resting his elbows on the table. What's yours? She held up her copy of Pride and Prejudice. Comfort read. Classic, he said approvingly. Though I have to admit, I'm more of a persuasion guy. Cindy's eyebrows lifted. You've read Austen? More than once. His smile was quick, disarming. What can I say? I like sharp dialogue. Cindy felt something shift, a spark, small but undeniable. She wasn't sure if it was his smile, his voice, or the fact that he knew Austen beyond the movie adaptations. Whatever it was, it made her curious. They talked. About books, about favorite authors, about why neither of them was drinking the punch. It looks like it could dissolve metal, he joked. Cindy found herself leaning in, laughing at his dry humor, forgetting the clock entirely. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't counting down the minutes. She wasn't thinking about work or deadlines or the ache of loneliness that usually hovered at the edges of her life. She was just there, present, and it felt good. Across the room, Marlene announced the start of the sweater contest. Cheers erupted, cameras flashed, and Cindy barely noticed. She was too busy listening to the man across from her describe the time he accidentally joined a book club full of retirees and ended up loving it. His name, she learned, was Ethan Parker, consultant, new to the company, rugged, charming, and apparently, a reader. Cindy closed her book, smiling. For once, the ceiling didn't need to have answers. Chapter 5. The unexpected interruption. The sweater contest was in full swing, but Cindy barely noticed the parade of jingling bells and blinking lights across the room. Her world had narrowed to the small table by the window, where Ethan Parker sat with his book open, looking perfectly at ease in the chaos. It was disarming, really. Most men she'd met at office parties were either glued to the bar or networking like their lives depended on it. Ethan? He was sipping coffee, flipping pages, and smiling like this was the most natural thing in the world. So, Cindy said, tilting her head, how does a consultant end up at a Christmas party reading the Night Circus? Ethan's grin was quick, warm. Occupational hazard. I spend half my life in airports and hotel lobbies. Books keep me sane. That explains the well-loved cover, she said, nodding at the frayed edges. He glanced down at the book, then back at her. It's my third time through. Morgenstern has this way of making magic feel possible. Cindy smiled, intrigued. You're a rereader? Absolutely. Good stories deserve second chances. His eyes held hers for a beat longer than necessary, and Cindy felt a flicker of heat in her cheeks. She cleared her throat, pretending to study her own book. I'm the same. Austen is my comfort zone. Let me guess, Darcy fan? His tone was teasing, but not unkind. Cindy smirked. Who isn't? Fair point, he said, leaning back in his chair. Though I've always thought Wentworth had more depth. Her eyebrows lifted. You've read Persuasion? Twice, he said, deadpan. Don't look so shocked. I'm not just a guy with a calculator. Cindy laughed, really laughed, and the sound startled her. It had been a long time since someone made her laugh like that. Okay, that's impressive. Impressive enough to earn a coffee refill? He asked, nodding toward her empty cup. She hesitated, then smiled. Maybe. The sweater contest roared on in the background. Someone had just unveiled a sweater with actual twinkling lights, but Cindy barely registered it. She was too busy listening to Ethan describe the time he accidentally joined a book club full of retirees. They were ruthless, he said, eyes dancing with amusement. If you didn't finish the book, they'd glare at you over their bifocals like you'd committed a felony. Cindy laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. And you stayed. For 6 months, he said with mock solemnity. Best discussions I've ever had. She shook her head, grinning. You're full of surprises. Stick around, he said lightly. There might be more. The words hung between them, casual but charged. Cindy felt something shift, a spark, small but undeniable. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about deadlines or loneliness or the ache of what was missing. She was just here, and it felt good. Across the room, Marlene's voice boomed, and the winner of the ugly sweater contest is Ethan Parker. Cindy blinked. Wait, what? Ethan looked genuinely startled as cheers erupted. He glanced down at his sweater, navy blue, tasteful, with a single embroidered snowflake. This isn't even ugly. Apparently subtlety wins, Cindy said, laughing as Marlene barreled toward them with a glittering crown and a sign that read King of Christmas Fashion. Ethan groaned good-naturedly as Marlene plopped the crown on his head. Speech, someone yelled. He stood, crown askew, and raised his coffee cup. To irony, he said dryly, earning a wave of laughter. When he sat back down, Cindy was still smiling. King of Christmas Fashion. That's quite a title. Don't let it intimidate you, he said, eyes twinkling. I'm still just a guy who likes books. And for the first time in a long time, Cindy felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Chapter 6. The reveal. The crown was still perched on Ethan's head like a joke that refused to die. Cindy tried not to laugh every time he adjusted it, but the sight was too much. A rugged man in a tailored jacket wearing glitter like it was a badge of honor. Do I look ridiculous? He asked, deadpan, sipping his coffee as if nothing was amiss. Absolutely, Cindy said, grinning, but in a very dignified way. Dignified ridiculousness, he mused. I'll add that to my resume. She laughed, and the sound felt easy, natural. For the first time in years, she wasn't calculating her exit strategy at a party. She was enjoying herself, and that realization startled her. So, she said, leaning forward, "Consultant, huh? What's your story?" Ethan set his book aside, resting his forearms on the table. "Short version? I help companies untangle messes. Systems, processes, the occasional human drama." "Sounds glamorous," Cindy teased. He chuckled. "Mostly it's spreadsheets and coffee. Lots of coffee. And airports," she added, remembering his earlier comment. "Airports, hotel lobbies, rental cars that smell like regret." His smile was wry, but his eyes softened. "It's not all bad. I get to meet interesting people." Cindy tilted her head. "Like retirees with sharp tongues?" "Exactly." He grinned. "And now, apparently, book-reading rebels at Christmas parties." Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to being noticed like this. Not for her looks, not for her charm, but for something that felt real. "What about you?" he asked. "What's Cindy Moore's story?" She hesitated. "Not much to tell. I work. I read. Occasionally I organize holiday chaos." "Sounds like you're underselling yourself," he said gently. She shrugged. "I like my job. I like books. That's enough." "Is it?" His tone was curious, not judgmental. Cindy looked down at her coffee, swirling the last sip. "Most days. Some days. I wonder." "About what?" She met his gaze, surprised by the openness in his expression. "Whether love is real," she said before she could stop herself. The words hung between them, raw and unpolished. Cindy braced for awkwardness, but Ethan didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly like he understood. "It is," he said quietly. "But it's rare, and it's worth waiting for." Something in his voice, steady, certain, made Cindy's chest tighten. She wanted to ask how he knew, but before she could, Marlene swooped in like a festive hurricane. "Ethan, photo time," she chirped, dragging him toward the makeshift backdrop. "Our king of Christmas fashion needs to be immortalized." Ethan shot Cindy a look over his shoulder, half amused, half apologetic, as Marlene whisked him away. Cindy watched him go, her heart doing something it hadn't done in years, skipping. She sat back, pretending to read, but the words blurred. All she could think about was the man who wore a crown like a joke and spoke about love like it was something real. And for the first time in a long time, Cindy wondered if maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would be different. Chapter 7. The ugly sweater twist. The photo session was chaos. Marlene orchestrating poses like a Broadway director, co-workers cheering, camera flashes bouncing off tinsel. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, crown slightly crooked, holding his coffee like a prop. Cindy watched from her corner, biting back a laugh every time he gave her that "help me look." When he finally escaped, he dropped into the chair across from her with a dramatic sigh. "I think I've been inducted into some kind of holiday cult." Cindy grinned. "You wore the wrong sweater for a cult. Too tasteful." "Apparently that's what won me the crown," he said, tugging at the glittery monstrosity on his head. "Irony is powerful." She chuckled. "So, king of Christmas fashion, what's next? Royal decree? Mandatory caroling?" "Don't tempt me," he said, eyes twinkling. "I could ban fruitcake." "That would make you a hero," Cindy said, laughing. "Half the office would build you a throne." "Already have one," he said, gesturing to the chair. "It's ergonomic." She shook her head, smiling. "You're ridiculous." "Dignified ridiculousness," he corrected, echoing their earlier joke. "It's my brand now." The party rolled on, music louder, laughter spilling like champagne, but Cindy barely noticed. Their conversation flowed easily, weaving between books, travel mishaps, and holiday traditions. Ethan confessed he'd never successfully baked cookies without setting off a smoke alarm. Cindy admitted she'd once tried to knit a scarf and ended up with something that looked like a question mark. "Sounds like we'd make a great disaster team," he said, grinning. "Or a cautionary tale," she countered. "Either way," he said, leaning in slightly, "it'd be memorable." The words were light, playful, but they landed with weight. Cindy felt her pulse skip, her breath catch. She wasn't used to this, banter that felt like more than banter, laughter that warmed places she'd forgotten were cold. Across the room, Marlene announced the raffle winners. Someone cheered, someone groaned, and Cindy realized the party was winding down. People were gathering coats, hugging goodbyes, promising to catch up after the holidays. Ethan glanced at his watch, then at her. "Looks like the cult is disbanding." "Until next year," Cindy said, closing her book. He hesitated, then smiled, a smile that felt like an invitation. "You know, I'd hate to leave our conversation unfinished." Her heart thudded. "Unfinished? There's still the great Austen debate," he said lightly. "And I owe you a coffee refill." Cindy swallowed, her mind racing. She wasn't impulsive. She didn't do spontaneous. But something about Ethan, his calm, his humor, the way he looked at her like she wasn't invisible, made her want to break her own rules. "Coffee," she said slowly. "I think I could manage that." His grin widened, warm and certain. "Tomorrow." She nodded, surprising herself. Tomorrow. As she slipped on her coat and stepped into the crisp night air, Cindy felt something she hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. The city lights glittered like promises, and for once, the season didn't feel like a reminder of what was missing. It felt like the start of something. Chapter 8. Coffee after Christmas. The cafe was tucked on a quiet corner, its windows glowing like a promise against the gray December sky. Cindy hesitated at the door, brushing snowflakes from her coat. She wasn't nervous, at least that's what she told herself, but her pulse had other ideas. Inside, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. The air smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, and soft jazz hummed from hidden speakers. A Christmas tree stood near the counter, modest but charming, its ornaments catching the light. Ethan was already there, seated at a small table by the window. He looked up as she entered, and the smile that spread across his face was, well, it was something. Easy. Genuine. The kind of smile that made you feel seen. Cindy, he said, standing to pull out her chair. Glad you made it. She smiled back, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. Wouldn't miss it. They ordered coffee, hers a caramel latte, his black with a splash of cream, and settled in. Outside, snow drifted lazily past the glass, turning the street into a postcard. Cindy wrapped her hands around her cup, savoring the heat. So, Ethan said, leaning back, tell me, what's the verdict on the sweater contest? Am I officially a fashion icon? Cindy laughed. Icon might be a stretch, but you did dethrone the guy with the sweater that had actual lights. Tragic, he said solemnly. I was rooting for him. You were rooting for irony, she teased. Always, he said, grinning. It keeps life interesting. They talked about books, about travel, about the absurdity of holiday traditions. Ethan told her about the time he spent Christmas in an airport during a snowstorm, surviving on vending machine snacks and a paperback thriller. Best plot twist I ever read, he said. Mostly because I didn't have a choice. Cindy laughed, shaking her head. That sounds awful. It wasn't great, he admitted. But it makes a good story now. She found herself leaning in, drawn by the warmth in his voice, the way he spoke like every word mattered. It was rare. Someone who listened as much as he talked, who asked questions because he wanted answers, not because he was filling silence. What about you? He asked. Any memorable Christmas disasters? Cindy thought for a moment. Once, in college, I tried to bake gingerbread cookies for my study group. They came out like bricks. We used them as paperweights. Ethan laughed, rich and genuine. That's fantastic. Functional baking. Not my proudest moment, she said, smiling. Sounds like we'd make a great team, he said lightly. You bake. I'll bring the fire extinguisher. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks warmed. You're assuming I'd try again. I'm an optimist, he said, his gaze steady. Especially about second chances. The words lingered, soft but weighted. Cindy felt something shift, a quiet click, like a lock turning. She wasn't sure what to say, so she sipped her latte, hoping it hid the smile tugging at her lips. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the street in white. Inside, the cafe felt like its own little world, warm, bright, untouched by the rush beyond the glass. Cindy realized she didn't want this moment to end, and that thought scared her just a little, because wanting meant hoping, and hoping meant risking. But as Ethan leaned forward, his voice low, his eyes kind, Cindy wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was worth the risk. Chapter 9. Doubts and Dreams. Snow still clung to Cindy's boots when she stepped into her apartment that evening, the warmth of the cafe lingering like a secret she wasn't ready to share. She hung up her coat, set her bag down, and stood in the quiet, listening to the hum of the heater. Normally, silence was her refuge. Tonight, it felt complicated. She curled up on the couch, pulling a blanket over her legs, and stared at the city lights outside her window. The coffee date had been perfect, easy conversation, laughter that felt unforced, a spark she couldn't deny. And that was the problem, because sparks led to fires. Fires burned. Cindy knew this. She'd learned it the hard way. Years ago, there had been someone briefly, intensely, who made her believe in forever. He'd promised stability, shared dreams, whispered words that sounded like truth. And then, just as quickly, he'd vanished, leaving Cindy with nothing but questions and a hollow ache she buried under work and ambition. Since then, she'd built walls, strong ones, walls made of deadlines and research papers and the comforting certainty of solitude. No surprises, no heartbreak, safe. But tonight, those walls felt thinner. Ethan's smile had chipped at them. His voice had slipped through cracks she didn't know existed, and that terrified her. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. Had a great time today. Next round of coffee's on me. Or tea if you're feeling rebellious. Cindy stared at the screen, her heart doing that inconvenient skip again. She typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally, she settled on, I had a great time too. Coffee sounds good. She hit send before she could overthink it. Then she set the phone down and exhaled, wondering when her life had started feeling like a novel with an unpredictable plot. The next day, they met again. Same cafe, same window seat. But this time the snow had melted into slush and the air smelled faintly of rain. Ethan was already there, crown-free but still carrying that easy confidence that made Cindy feel both calm and unsettled. "Tea?" he asked as she sat down, eyes dancing with mischief. "Still coffee," she said, smiling despite herself. Their conversation wandered. Books, travel, music. But eventually, it circled back to something deeper. "So," Ethan said, stirring his drink, "you asked me yesterday if love was real." Cindy blinked. "I didn't think you'd remember that." "I remember everything you say," he replied simply. "And I meant what I said. It's real. Rare. But real." She hesitated. "You sound certain." "I've seen enough to know," he said, his tone quiet but steady. "My parents were married 40 years. They fought, they laughed, they built a life together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real." Cindy felt a pang, envy, maybe, or longing. "That's rare." "It is," he agreed. "But rare doesn't mean impossible." She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "I've been burned before." "I figured," he said gently. "Most people have." She met his gaze, surprised by the lack of judgment there. Just understanding. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "Once. Long time ago. Thought I had it all figured out. Turns out I didn't." "What happened?" "She wanted a life that didn't include airports and hotel lobbies," he said with a shrug. "Can't blame her." Cindy studied him, wondering how someone could speak about heartbreak with such calm. Maybe that was what time did. It softened the edges, turned pain into stories. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but weighted. Cindy felt the question rising before she could stop it. "Why bother?" she asked softly. "If it hurts that much when it ends?" Ethan's eyes held hers, steady and warm. "Because when it's real, it's worth every risk." The words settled in her chest like embers. Quiet, glowing, impossible to ignore. They talked until the cafe lights dimmed, until the barista started stacking chairs. When they finally stepped outside, the air was crisp, the city humming with holiday lights. Ethan walked her to her car, hands in his pockets, his smile easy. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. Cindy hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow." And as she drove home, her doubts lingered, but so did something else. Something stronger. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Chapter 10. Christmas Eve magic. Christmas Eve arrived draped in silver frost, the city humming with last-minute shoppers and carols spilling from every doorway. Cindy stood in her kitchen, staring at the mixing bowl like it was a math problem she hadn't studied for. She had agreed, to bake cookies with Ethan. It had seemed harmless when he suggested it over coffee yesterday, his grin daring her to prove she could conquer gingerbread. Now, surrounded by flour and existential dread, Cindy wondered if she should have just volunteered to bring store-bought. The doorbell rang before she could stage a retreat. Cindy wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door to find Ethan standing there, arms full of grocery bags and wearing a scarf that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. "Backup supplies," he said, stepping inside with a grin. "Because I had a feeling you'd panic." "I wasn't panicking," Cindy lied, eyeing the bags. "Much." They unpacked together, flour, sugar, spices, and, inexplicably, a tiny Christmas tree. "What's that for?" Cindy asked, laughing as he set it on the counter. "Ambience," Ethan said, plugging in the lights. "You can't bake without proper mood lighting." Cindy shook her head, smiling despite herself. "You're ridiculous." "Dignified ridiculousness," he reminded her. And she laughed so hard she nearly dropped the cinnamon. The baking began with optimism and quickly spiraled into comedy. Cindy misread the recipe and doubled the molasses. Ethan tried to roll dough and ended up with something resembling abstract art. Flour dusted the counters, their clothes, even Cindy's hair. "Okay," Ethan said, surveying the chaos. "We might not win any awards." "Speak for yourself," Cindy said, holding up a cookie shaped vaguely like a star. "This one has character." "It has personality," Ethan agreed, grinning. "Like its creator." Her cheeks warmed, and she turned back to the tray, hoping he didn't notice. When the cookies finally emerged, lopsided but edible, they carried them to the living room, mugs of cocoa in hand. Cindy's apartment glowed softly, the tree lights casting warm shadows. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals, muffling the world. They sat on the couch, plates balanced on their knees, laughter lingering like music. Cindy felt something settle inside her, a quiet joy, unexpected and fragile. "This," Ethan said, biting into a cookie, "is the best Christmas Eve I've had in years." Cindy blinked. "Seriously? You've been to airports in snowstorms. The bar is low." He smiled, eyes steady. "Still true." She looked away, her heart thudding. "It's nice," she said softly. "Better than I expected." "Better than pretending the season doesn't exist?" he asked gently. Her breath caught. He remembered. That night after Thanksgiving, when she'd wanted to escape to a beach, to skip the holidays entirely. She nodded, unable to speak. Ethan set his mug down, his voice quiet. "I'm glad you didn't." Cindy met his gaze, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The glow of lights, the scent of cinnamon, the warmth of something new and terrifying and wonderful. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But when Ethan reached out and brushed a streak of flour from her cheek, Cindy felt the promise in that simple touch. And for the first time in years, Christmas didn't feel like a reminder of what was missing. Felt like the beginning of something real. Chapter 11. The kiss under the lights. The city was alive with Christmas night magic, streets shimmering under strings of lights, shop windows glowing like lanterns, and the faint hum of carols drifting through the cold air. Cindy walked beside Ethan, her boots crunching softly against the thin layer of snow. The air was crisp, sharp enough to sting her cheeks, but she barely noticed. They had left her apartment hours ago, deciding on a whim to take a walk after their cookie fiasco. Now, they strolled through the park, where a towering Christmas tree stood at the center, its branches heavy with ornaments and twinkling lights that looked like captured stars. Ethan slowed as they approached, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You know," he said, glancing at her with that easy smile, "I think this beats the sweater contest." Cindy laughed softly. "Low bar." "True," he admitted, his grin widening. But still, they stopped near the tree, the glow washing over them in gold and green. Couples lingered nearby, snapping photos, laughing softly. Cindy felt the weight of the moment settle around her, warm, expectant, like the hush before a page turns. Ethan turned to face her fully, his expression shifting. Still gentle, but serious now, like he was choosing his words carefully. "I'm glad you didn't skip Christmas," he said quietly. Cindy swallowed, her breath misting in the cold. "Me too." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The world seemed to shrink to the space between them, the glow of lights, the distant sound of carols, the steady rhythm of her own pulse. And then Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing hers, tentative but sure. Cindy felt the spark leap like static, sharp and sweet. "Cindy," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Tell me if I'm wrong." She shook her head, barely breathing. "You're not." The kiss was soft at first, almost cautious, a question asked and answered in the same breath. Then it deepened, slow and certain, like something inevitable. Cindy felt the world tilt, felt the cold vanish, felt every wall she built crumble like sugar under rain. When they finally pulled apart, the lights blurred behind her, and Cindy realized she was smiling. Really smiling, the kind that reached her eyes. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm in the winter air. "So," he murmured, "does this count as proof?" "Proof of what?" she whispered, though she already knew. "That love is real." Her heart clenched, then opened like a door she'd kept locked for too long. "Yeah," she said softly. "It does." They stood there for a while, the tree glowing above them, snow drifting like confetti. Cindy felt something settle inside her. Not fear, not doubt, but something bright and steady. Hope. And for the first time in years, she believed it wasn't just a word in a book. Chapter 12. New year, new chapter. New Year's Eve crept in quietly, the city shimmering under a canopy of lights, as if the world had decided to dress up for one last celebration. Cindy stood by her window, watching snowflakes swirl like confetti, her thoughts drifting back over the past month. A month ago, she'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if love was real. Tonight, she didn't have to wonder. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Ready for round 2 of cookie disasters? Or should we start the year with something less flammable?" Cindy laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. She typed back, "Less flammable sounds good, but keep the ambience tree." Later, they met at the same cafe where it all began. The place was quieter now, the holiday rush gone, replaced by soft music and the scent of fresh coffee. Ethan was already there, his scarf draped over the chair, his smile easy as ever. "Happy almost New Year," he said, standing to hug her. It was brief, casual, but it felt like home. "Happy almost New Year," she echoed, sliding into the seat across from him. They talked about resolutions. His was to learn how to bake without setting off alarms. Hers was to take more chances. "Starting with this?" he asked, his tone teasing but gentle. "Starting with this?" she said, meeting his gaze. And it was true. For Cindy, this wasn't just coffee. It was a choice, a deliberate step out of the safe, predictable world she'd built. A step toward something uncertain, something real. When midnight came, they walked outside, the city alive with laughter and countdowns. Fireworks burst in the distance, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Ethan slipped his hand into hers, warm and steady, and Cindy felt the weight of the moment settle like a promise. "New chapter," he said softly. She smiled, her heart light. "New chapter." And as the first firework bloomed overhead, Cindy realized something simple and profound. Love wasn't a myth, or a movie trope, or a question without an answer. It was here. It was real. And it was hers. Epilogue. 1 year later, the office was buzzing with holiday cheer again. Garlands draped across doorways. The break room transformed into a buffet of sugar and caffeine. Cindy stood near the entrance, watching the familiar chaos unfold. Ugly sweaters blinked like neon signs, Marlene's earrings jingled with every step, and someone had already spiked the punch. But this year, Cindy wasn't hiding in a corner with a book. She was laughing, really laughing, as Ethan adjusted the glittering crown Marlene had just plopped on his head. "Déjà vu," he said, grinning at her. "Think they'll ever retire this tradition?" "Not a chance," Cindy replied, her eyes sparkling. "You're practically royalty now. King of Christmas fashion," he said solemnly, holding up his coffee like a scepter. "Long may I reign." She rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered. A year ago, this had been the moment that changed everything. A quiet table, 2 books, and a conversation that felt like magic. Now it was their inside joke, their shared story. As the party roared on, Cindy slipped her hand into Ethan's, feeling the steady warmth of his fingers. Outside, snow fell in soft spirals, just like it had that night under the tree. Ethan leaned close, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "So," he murmured, still wondering if love is real. Cindy looked up at him, her heart full, her answer certain. "Not anymore." And as laughter spilled around them and lights glittered overhead, Cindy realized something simple and profound. The ceiling had never had the answers. But life, unexpected, messy, beautiful, did.